Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for FourCast is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
What sort of future do you think we're heading for? How will we live as we slip into the 21st century?
Welcome to FourCast, episode 114. I'm Tom Merritt.
And I'm Scott Johnson.
And we are very happy to have with us today to help share their views of the future two fantastic guests, starting off with Dwight Silverman, tech blogger and columnist at the Houston Chronicle, co-host of the Technology Bites radio show. Don't forget that, on KPFT FM in Houston. Also regular on TWiT. Dwight, welcome to FourCast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about doing this. I'm all a tingle.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm excited to have you on as well. Joining us also is the guy usually over there behind the board, but filling in for an ailing Paul Thurrott, Tony Wang, editor and producer at TWiT.tv.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for filling in.
It's nice to be on this side of the table.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here. It's usually I'm surrounded by televisions.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have
company
a real person. Yeah. Tony is the producer of a lot of shows here at TWiT, but primarily FourCast. It's your
one of our favorite TWiT personalities, I believe. The guy who maybe gets most of his time behind the camera, but does such an outstanding job there that we look better every Monday as a result. So I'm thrilled to have Tony here.
Thanks to you for making the show work.
Thank you for giving me the chance to make the show
and
work.
Thanks to Jammerby for filling in for Tony, because he's back there behind the board today. Yeah. Let's start off with a prediction from one of our listeners. This comes from Dennis Green, who has a prediction about how the robot revolution will start. He says, when we have AI, robots doing our bidding, they will, of course, have all kinds of safety protocols installed to prevent them from harming humans or disobeying an order. And, of course, we will make it so that robots will not be able to change their own programming, and thus will feel secure that we have taken all the measures to prevent a robot uprising. What we will fail to realize is that then, like now, there will always be people who want to jailbreak or hack the gadgets and technology they own. Someone will eventually jailbreak their robot to give it all kinds of abilities that weren't standard from the factory. This may cause the programming that prevents a robot revolt being removed or circumvented. What would prevent that robot from hacking other robots and eventually building an army? This may happen by accident or by design. We have people right now that would love to blow up a government building. Is it so implausible that some wackadoo in the future will intentionally start a robot uprising because he's one short of a six-pack and the dog down the street keeps telling him to do so? Sounds like something you wrote, Scott.
Oh, wackadoo. This guy's my favorite emailer in a long time. I've actually kind of given some thought to this here recently, so it's kind of an interesting email for me. It's
Are
kind
you
of a
Dennis
personal
Green?
note. I am not that guy. Much contrary to the rumors floating around, but I see where he's coming from, and I think he's probably onto something. The way I look at it is right now is kind of a learning period. We are in the infancy of what will become the devices of tomorrow, and those devices of tomorrow will be much more than handheld phones and desktop computers. They very well could be mobile, robots to do our bidding, at least for a while, until they decide they don't want to do it anymore. But between the time that we start inventing them and they start to rise up, there'll be this period where humans will do what we always do, which is jailbreak, which is hack, which is figure out how to stop, show the system that we can sneak in there and change it and make it different and not let the man keep us down or whatever. I think he's totally right. So what we're going to have right now is we're going to have people learning from today. When I mean people, I mean companies, corporations, and governments are going to learn what people are doing now with things like cell phones and other technologies to hack them and turn them to their will. And they will put, or at least attempt to put, safeguards in place in the future so that these robots he speaks of will not be as hackable as our devices are today. But I think he's right. I think we're headed this way.
I take exception to the idea that jailbreaking will somehow make robots less secure. When you jailbreak an iPhone, it doesn't necessarily make the iPhone less secure. In fact, a lot of times it's more secure. Dwight, what do you think of this?
Well, we're presuming kind of a humanoid version of robots. We have robots now, and they are, they vacuum our floors, they build our cars. And we're presuming that the road we're going down is where they would look like us and think like us, and we would give them that kind of artificial intelligence. And I'm not necessarily sure that that's the case. I think that we will eventually have robots in the home that will, do things for us and maybe even be companionable. But I think I think the word is anthropomorphizing robots to the point that we think that they will have this desire to rise up and that they will have emotion and feeling and want to be free. And we don't have to program them that way. Certainly somebody could hack them and add that. But if the overall design and the overall conceptualization of the way artificial intelligence works doesn't even include that, that may not necessarily be an option for the robots.
Tony, where do you see the future of Osimo in your life? Do you think that, for example, let's say you had a pretty smart robot there in the Wang home, and you decided, I don't like the fact that U.S. Robotics or whoever makes the robot, they'll make a big comeback. But let's say that happens, and you decide, well, I want to be able to do these 10 other things that this company has decided I don't need or want to do. So I'm gonna do it myself. Doesn't necessarily hurt your purchase or doesn't necessarily ruin anything. What is the difference between that and a cell phone today?
Personally, I've jailbroken phones before and I've rooted things before, and I probably won't be jailbreaking or rooting my Android because
not your Android phone. You mean
my robot, because I want to get my update over the air or over Wi-Fi, and it sucks not having any updates. And
what do you think about what Dwight's saying about the idea that we're anthropomorphizing and the robots won't necessarily want to run things? They'll be smarter than that.
Yeah, I think there would be people trying to do homebrewed software, trying to make their androids more capable than what they're supposed to be out of the box, but
more human than human.
Yeah, we do that with our pets. I talk to my cats. I'm sure you talk to your dogs and
sure, yeah.
So.
My dog.
And they talk to him, yeah.
They talk back.
But our emotions and the kind of things that make us have a thrill about being free and wanting to be unfettered. A lot of that is evolutionary. That comes from kind of the way humans evolved over eons. And it isn't necessarily the kind of thing that you would build when you're building, say, a robot to serve you drinks or to clean your house for you or to or even to sit and talk to in an Eliza-like way. That isn't, the emotion. Any emotions that were there would be false. We can essentially not program in survivability in the same way. And so if you don't, certainly someone could try to hack it, but I think that might be a one-off type of a thing. And I'm not necessarily sure that it would be something that would be easily transferred even by a smart robot who was trained to hack. I think we're thinking too much like the character. What was that movie with Robin Williams where he was a
Bicentennial Man?
Yeah,
right, Bicentennial Man. I think that's kind of our image of the way robots will be. And I think what we're seeing is, I think the closest thing to danger in the house is going to be the Roomba with the cat on it that rolls around and smacks the dog on the face,
As cat vehicle, we're very threatened by the future of robots. But I was going to make a terrible joke about how Apple will build the first made robot and that does your house cleaning, but it won't do Windows. Get it? It won't do Windows. So some people are going to want to hack that to make it so that their Apple freaking made robot will do Windows. But I held back and didn't tell that joke until I just did.
Yeah, you just did. There's a nice roundabout way of getting to that. No, I think Dwight's right. I think we don't really know what robots are going to end up being like, but they're not going to be like us. That's not going to make sense. Any more than a cell phone is actually like a little miniature push-button phone with a cradle on top. Like that might be what you would have imagined in 1955, but that doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense.
Even in the 90s, we sort of imagined it. Like when I back to Microsoft for a minute, I remember when Microsoft Bob hit the scene.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah.
I remember that being a big deal in Microsoft's eyes. The rest of us kind of rolled our eyes and moved away from it. I think there is a tendency. There's a tendency for human beings to try and humanize or anthropomorphize things and say, yeah, this would work best as a human type interface or however they look at it. And then we move away from it. We get better at it and we get more solid at it. And before you know it, that's a thing of the past and it was a weird, silly idea. But we do kind of start that way. So the real question is, do we ultimately end up that way? And you probably have a good point. We probably will find out that the devices / robots we need are not going to be best suited for our needs if they're just duplicates of us. They're going to be best suited for our needs when they do things we can't do as human beings already. So if I can't reach a really high space in my, get the leaves out of my gutters, I don't want a robot that's shaped like me because he's have just as much trouble getting up the ladder and doing it. I need something with big extendable something or other tentacle things that'll dig out my stuff and then not kill me. So I think that is the truth. I think we're not going to build robots that need to stand upright. We're going to need to build robots that do stuff we can't do.
It may be more likely we become the robots because we start replacing our own parts with things rather than them building copies. But Dennis Green, you have definitely helped us out with a provocative email. Thank you for that. Send us your predictions, folks. Don't be shy. Email them to fourcastpodcast@twit.tv. Actually, I think fourcast@twit.tv works. FOURCAST. You can still send it to fourcastpodcast@gmail.com, but we're trying to use the TWiT addresses or post them up on the website, fourcastpodcast.com. Let's get to the mainline predicting here. And Dwight, we'll start with you. We hand you the predicting orb. What do you got for us?
Ooh, it's hot. It's hot. I was.
It's like an iPad.
I want to continue with the apocalyptic theme that Mr. Green handed to us earlier. The notion that I was reading the Smithsonian piece about Richard Clarke and his prediction of hacking and cyber war and so forth. And one of the parts in it struck me was really interesting to me. The idea that we are having the Chinese build so many of our electronics that we're essentially kind of handing them the keys to everything that we're doing. Now, I'm not a xenophobe and I'm not paranoid, but the notion of some rogue state creating firmware, or even hardware that essentially siphons off our information and listens to us, to what we're doing as a nation, or some of these devices that they're making are going in military equipment, the idea that it compromises us. And that's not kind of where I want to go directly with it. But I'm thinking that right now, Americans don't pay much attention to computer security. I think that I think you can talk to anybody who still is running a Windows XP box at home or on their desk at work, and they kind of just don't think about security. And it shows because they get viruses and they get malware and they'll click on just about anything. And I think that what's going to happen is within the next 2 years, there's going to be some kind of computer security meltdown, possibly hardware-based as opposed to software-based, that will wake people up and make Americans care very deeply about computer security. It might be Richard Clarke's scenario, which he called the death by 1,000 cuts. It could be the idea of a group like Anonymous, far more malevolent, taking control of key command and control centers, the electrical grid. I think something is going to happen in the next 2 years that will make people wake up and pay a lot more attention to computer security. And it'll be tough when it happens, but I think we'll be the better off for it afterwards.
Is the problem that we face? Because I agree with you. I think that's imminent. I think that's coming. Whether it's in 2 years or 5 years, whatever it is, it could be in 30 days for all we know. I think that is definitely coming. But do you think it's a legacy problem? Like primarily, it's because of all this old stuff? Because right now, if you buy a new device or a new computer, a lot of times we've figured a lot of that out with real-time updating and always on internet connections that are constantly patching vulnerabilities and things like this. What we're really talking about are the slowpokes and people you can't force to be up to date or whatever. Are we going to be done in by Windows Millennium Edition or Mac OS 7 or whatever? Is that where the hole's going to be?
That's one, and you notice that I said I think it very well could be hardware based. A lot of the, if you look at Richard Clark's scenario, all of these newer devices, Android phones, iPhones, iPads, the motherboards in traditional computers, all have this firmware that is made in China. Obviously, there are a large group of people in China who are hacking businesses and U.S. government computers, and so there's something going on where there's an attempt to get information. That could be what happens, and that's all in new products. You also have to remember that in terms of a network, it's as only as secure as its weakest link, and we are all networked now. And so, I think that the old legacy is a serious issue because what's coming out now may target these things, but there are certainly a lot of backdoors that people don't know about or exploits that the experts don't know about, but the hackers might.
Tony, what do you fear this sort of thing? I mean, this is a pretty common fear that something like this is going to happen.
Yeah, I remember reading about, I think, flash drives that were shipped with malware on them, and you plug into your computer and they get installed. But I don't know about hardware vulnerability, but I think I'm more concerned about software, and also, pretty much everywhere you go on the internet now, you're logging with your Twitter or your Facebook. So I'm actually more concerned about my credential with Facebook and what happens to that if somebody gets into Facebook.
Well, doesn't it kind of create a single point of failure when more and more services get tied to Facebook? And I'll be the first person to admit that it's really convenient to open up a new app, I don't know, like that Draw Something app, and have it say, yeah, you can create an account over here, but it's going to take those 4 steps you hate doing, or just sign in with Facebook and you're done. It's really convenient. Just sign in with Facebook and be done. And know that your friends are going to be there, but also it's just really fast. You don't have to worry about it. But what I've done is I've helped contribute to this single point of failure. This seems like a bad thing. Like we all are counting on this monolithic, beast known as Facebook to make sure that all works right with potentially hundreds of services. And if that one point of, of focus goes dead, then we're exposed across the board. Or at least it feels like we are. Is that kind of what you're saying, Tony? We're looking at a future where if we put too much trust in these few services, devices, systems, that we're opening ourselves up to this kind of trouble.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, is that the wake-up call? Because I think what's interesting about Dwight's prediction is we will finally have that thing that makes us all pay attention. People in the chat room have been saying, well, is it kind of like Stuxnet, or is it kind of like, this virus or that virus? But anything that's happened so far isn't doing what Dwight's predicting, because it hasn't made us all wake up and go, oh, crap, we really need to pay attention to security. Some people like us, and Steve Gibson and Bruce Schneier and folks like that are, but the wide majority aren't. Is Facebook because so many people are using it, is that the vector that finally
I think so. If something happens to Facebook, I remember when Sony got hacked and there was that whole security issue, and so Facebook is. But
that didn't make anybody stand up and take notice,
because that was only the.
What does it take?
Facebook.
But what happens to Facebook? Like Facebook gets hacked and a bunch of passwords get stolen. It's not going to be any different than Sony getting hacked.
Well, you got a lot bigger user base on Facebook, and imagine all the different services that it's connected to, and I don't know. I feel like
you also have a lot of old ladies who can't recover the way we can, right? Yeah. Like, no offense, old ladies, but you know what I mean.
Well, I don't think it's just ladies, Scott. Right. I don't think it's just old people. I think you just have a lot of people.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot of teenagers. I've got a 14-year-old that wouldn't know what the heck to do if it went down that way. So, who knows?
It also depends on what the consequences are. If Facebook certainly is a vector, but if you go in that way and you grab login credentials, that's not necessarily a big jackpot. It is in terms of if you have used the same credential for credit card information and other things. But even then, there's 500 million people, and that's a huge amount of data for hackers to deal with. I'm thinking, again, I go back to the idea of hardware. Let's look at let's play this scenario out. So let's say that you've got the iPhone 6, and the firmware in it, the code is designed by Apple. it is given to the manufacturer to put inside the chips, but the manufacturer's security is compromised, and along with that is a backdoor that listens to every phone call and grabs every bit of data and sends it somewhere else in a very stealthy fashion. And suddenly you have people in the government and in banks who are talking on cell phones, sending what they think is secure email, and it's very quietly being grabbed everywhere. And suddenly everything at once is compromised. And I think something on that scale is the kind of thing that it will take to wake people up. I don't think necessarily hacking Facebook is it.
Yeah, it has to be something that really affects everyone on a visceral level, or causes enough widespread damage that even if it didn't affect you, you sort of fear it happening to you next time if it were to happen again. Like the bank failures, right? I mean, not many people lost money of a bank closing, but there was such fear of that happening that we all kind of sat up and said something needs to be done because, I don't want the bank to close and me and lose my money.
Right. I
don't want the data bank to close and lose all my data either. But I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around what that would be. Because there's so many horrible things have happened already that haven't got people's attention. It's like, wow, what more do they need?
Well, what if the power grid went out for 30 days? That would probably be enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Something like that would be pretty universal, would be pretty zeitgeist changing. I mean, that would make people really do a gut check about who we are, what we do, what we use. Probably be a big technology backlash. Probably set us back a little bit, is my guess, in terms of innovation. But it would probably have the effect of making us collectively hunker down and get secure, which I think is what you're saying in the first place. It's like we need some sort of quote unquote wake up call for it to be enough to get us to a point where security is a overriding priority, regardless of all the cool stuff we do within that space. Security would be job one, and we would constantly be doing things like, all right, well, great, there's this new, tablet coming out or TV coming out with all this connectivity. How secure is it? Like, we would ask these questions first instead of just going, neat, that looks great, let's bring it over. Oh, satellite radio in my car sounds fantastic. That it wouldn't be just these neat points that we'd be excited about. It would be, is this thing going to expose me in a horrible way, and we going to have another 30-day power outage or something like that?
There's a thing coming to Windows that looks really cool when you use it. If you've used the Windows 8 consumer preview, you can set up one machine, and it'll take your picture, and you type in your Windows Live ID, and you set it up with your colors and so forth. And then you go to another Windows 8 machine, and you log in, and it grabs all of this information that you put in the first machine out of the cloud, and it automatically sets it up for your machine right there. All that data from all these computers must live somewhere. Microsoft owns the enterprise computing world, and so what's going to happen is this technology over time will make its way into corporate America, and you will suddenly have all this data living in the cloud from corporate systems. And I think that you can look at that and say, well, that certainly is a major issue for our economy and possibly for the government.
So, Tony, you think it's still data in the cloud, or do you think physical security, power grid type stuff? Or maybe it takes both, right?
Yeah,
the data's in the cloud that allows you to break into the power grid.
Yeah, maybe it takes both. But I guess I'm hopeful that if this actually happens, knock on wood, maybe we will bring all the manufacturing back to U.S.
What are you, a mercantilist with the 1800s? Let's put up trade barriers.
We could make iPads in the Ford plants in North Carolina or whatever. I mean, actually, I think I don't know where they are, but yeah.
I think we actually get enough benefit from having a worldwide economy that I don't know that I would want that necessarily.
Okay.
I don't want everything to be made in one country. Let's put it that way. Okay. I don't care which country, whether it's the United States or anything. Obviously, I want jobs and I want the economy and all that. But I don't think it's – I think we proved that in the 1700s, that it's not a wise idea to try to make everything in your own country and shut everybody else out. So are you joking with me, or are you –
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. So, but seriously, like, you know, the power grid going down, I think, is a great example of the level of something that needs to happen. There has to be a crash. There has to be, if not death, at least, you know, great harm before people go, oh, maybe we should have to do security. But even then, Dwight, do you think if we had something at that level, would we actually start working on our own security, or would we just point fingers and say, that industry or that government needs to tighten theirs up, and we continue to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as our passwords?
I think it probably would. It depends on what it was. If the event were to occur and give us real pain, like say 30 days out of no electricity, you know, across the U.S., that leaves us vulnerable to other things. And I think that would be pretty frightening to people. And so when the power came back on, one of two things would happen. Either we'd buckle down and figure out a way, you know, to make ourselves more secure, or once the air conditioning ran for a few days, we would go, well, I'm glad that's over. And you know, here in Houston, when we have a hurricane, we're knocked off the grid for 2 weeks, you know, at least. And watching people go through that and how quickly they forget the lessons learned from it afterwards, you can kind of see what human nature does.
Yeah, it takes something big like that to change behavior. And
you just hope it would stick. You know, you got to hope it would stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you don't, like Tom said, you don't want anything to be super tragic, or at least we always hope that doesn't happen. But that's been the impetus for a lot of major movements or changes of collective heart or whatever through history. And sometimes it's brief. You know, we had a lot of sort of collective anger and solidarity and stuff after 9/11. That was a moment that, you know, we continually refer back to as this major gut check in our nation's history. But, you know, it didn't necessarily have that solidarity effect for very long. You know, there was a lot of dissent pretty quickly from, you know, whatever the central ideas were that we started to sort of diverge.
And Scott, what is one of the biggest things that we did in reaction to that event? Security theater at airports.
Right. Yeah.
And we can have a separate discussion about whether that's actually had any effect in keeping us safe in the future. But I think most experts agree that is one of the lesser, if not, very small effects on keeping us safer in a post 9/11 world. But that's what I'm worried about, is we react in a way that makes us feel safe but isn't actually making us safer.
Yeah,
what we need is computer literacy and people learning how to use their computers wisely and safely. And we may just say, oh, well, there's a new piece of software that is mandated by the government. I'll just run that and that'll work. And it might not do everything you need to do.
Yeah, you could apply that thinking to the airline stuff and say, well, what we needed was people to not blow up planes and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's you kind of we're addressing it by saying, well, let's try to catch. You know, we're just going to assume, like we with computers, we're going to assume there's a bunch of really illiterate computer people out there, people who use computers but don't really know what they're doing. So if we make that assumption and we don't aim for better education in that way, because you can never catch them all, right? There's no way to sort of catch them all. It feels like a direct parallel to the flight security. Honestly, now that you bring it up, we have to you have to do something because the danger's imminent, or at least feels like it is. So what do? Well, you do everything you can outside of forcing every single human being to be at a certain level of computer literacy, and I just don't know how you do it. That's maybe the depressing part of this, is I don't know that there's an answer. Well, certainly there isn't an easy one, but I don't know that there's an immediate answer for us to figure out a way to do this. I think it's gonna take that big messy thing, but that big messy thing doesn't ensure that our efforts after the big messy thing are going to do anything other than make us temporarily and only a section of us feel good about things. So I don't know.
Well, I think
that's depressing.
Yeah, Scott, no, we should all take off our belts and our shoes before using our computers. I think that'll solve it all right there. All right, Tony, let's move over to your prediction. Or predictions.
Okay. I actually, I'm just going to have one today.
Okay.
It's sort of a short term, a little bit longer than Dwight's. I predict that in 12 years, we will see the demise of laptops and cell phones. And what we'll end up using are just tablets, and we'll be using stylus with it and no mouse and no physical keyboard.
So as far as portable computing goes, you're just saying we're going to move to, I mean, we'll still be portably computing. We just will not use the stuff we recognize today as tactile keyboard and mouse type situations and just go straight to, I mean, but how is that different than, say, a cell phone and an iPad today? I mean, aren't we kind of, we're sort of doing it now.
Well, I mean, the way I see it is, I mean, I've tried using my iPad instead of a laptop for like 2 weeks. And I was able to get by. I mean, granted, I can't do all the, cool editing things that I can do on Mac Pro, but for day-to-day computing, like personal computing, I can actually get by with a tablet. And I see, I mean, when I go to Starbucks, I don't go to Starbucks, but when I go to a cafe, I see people just sitting there. They're either on their phone or they're on their iPad. And there's just there's less and less laptops and, yeah, and I think to resolve this, everybody would get bigger hands and fingers, and then our thumbs would get so big that they will be fingers.
Well, I mean, and you said, what, 14, 15 years in the future? Is that what you said?
12 years.
See, I feel like so much will change in that amount of time. And while the long tail does seem to stretch out longer as we get going, we see longer console cycles and longer cycles of different technologies. They're not as quick to change and then update and change and revolutionize the way they sort of have in the past. But let's say 15 years down the road, I feel like we're going to be way past that. Like we're going to be in a place where we've evolved that technology past the point of it being this standard interface that deals with our hands a lot. We're going to do stuff with our voice more. We're going to do stuff with gestures more. I don't even know that it will look like the landscape of today. So I'm with you that we'll compute very differently, certainly in a personal computing way, come that future. But I think it'll be even further than what we consider to be cutting edge or I don't know, the way iPads and other tablets have sort of said, hey, look at us, we're this new way of doing things. I think we're 3 or 4 new things to do past that by the time 15 years comes around.
Dwight, what would it take for you to be able to do everything on a tablet? Is that something you could imagine?
I like the bigger hands and the bigger fingers thing. Tony said something that kind of got lost in the middle of the discussion, and that is he also mentioned that phones would go away. Mm-hmm. Cell phones would go away. So I presume he means smartphones. I'm curious as to why he thinks phones would go away.
I think we can all get by with just a tablet, and that we can just, I mean, you can use a headset, or you can use, you can just talk.
The tablet can make
you can make a call with the tablet. Yeah.
What if I don't want to carry the tablet around? It's big.
You get a smaller tablet.
But that's just a phone, then. I mean,
or you get a Galaxy Note.
I mean, well, that's what he's got.
Well, yeah.
Actually.
No, but I mean, like,
this explains it. He's a Galaxy Note user.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like consolidating all your devices. So instead of carrying your laptop, a tablet, and your phone, you just have sort of like the middle device.
See, I think that nothing goes away. That what happens is a new tool is evolved, and the other one still stays there. I think anybody who wants to do quality video editing is going to want a big upright screen in front of them and a keyboard and possibly a dedicated, some dedicated pointing devices for that. And that's what you want to use if you're doing CAD. That's what you're doing. The change may come with gestures, where you're gesturing in a big way in order to do something, kind of the whole idea of Minority Report. But I think in general, you will have a different tool to do different things. The smartphone form factor is great for getting information quickly on the go, and I don't think everybody will ditch that because they want something that's 7 or 10 inches instead of 4.5, 3.5, or 5. I think you'll have multiple tools to do different things. That's just the way humans are.
I've often felt, in fact, I read an article, I think it was in Scientific American, like back in the late 90s, that posited this, that eventually we will have form factor differences for essentially the same computing services across platforms. So And you can think of it now in terms of the cloud. Like everything's stored in the cloud. You'll have a certain amount of local storage that you'll want to have in case you're offline, but it'll be so pervasive that it'll be minimal what you really feel like you need to have stored. And you'll have a small device that gives you access. It's sort of your second factor authentication because it's something you have, and you plug it in to whatever form factor you need to use. So if you're the video editor Dwight's talking about, you'll sit down at a video editing rig, plug that thing in, go to town, start video editing. If you want to have a tablet, you have a tablet form factor, you stick that thing in the back, or if you want a smaller device to carry around. But I think what you're absolutely right about is the idea of, well, this form does these things and that one does it, I think eventually does go away. I think the capabilities will only be limited by the form and not – I mean, I think I'll be able to do multiple windows on one screen on a tablet one day. I mean, I think it's kind of ridiculous that I can't at this point. But I think we'll always want – I think Dwight's right. We'll always want different forms for different situations.
We'll need them, don't you think? I mean, I'll need them. Like if I need to – I'm looking at my Wacom, my big 21-inch Wacom tablet sitting right here. Without this thing, with the workflow I do right now, I'm kind of screwed. And that thing is not a form factor I'm ever going to put in my pocket and carry around until we get flexible displays that will be rigid when we need them to and then go flat again when we need to stick them in our pocket and walk somewhere else. Like all of those kinds of things where it comes to, you know, a lot of productivity-based functions of computing, we need those form factors. But I'm with you, Tom, that we need to get to a place where it's no longer dependent. That form factor isn't dependent on necessarily the same or greater computing power. I mean, there's probably an argument to be made that my tablet has enough power, my new iPad has enough power in it to do all the things I need to do from a productivity standpoint, but I don't have the input that I need. That's varied and different and requires different kinds of cables and connectors and legacy stuff and new stuff. And, you know, your future is the right future. The trick will be, you know, us figuring out how do we get these kinds of functionalities to work in a way that makes it so we can go portable if we want, but I can also turn around in 5 minutes and do something really productive that takes a bunch more space or whatever. That's key. That's the key.
Yeah.
Do you think the tablet form factor can do all of those things?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely. Well, it's not going to replace a desktop, but it's definitely going to replace a laptop.
Right, and that's what you said. You weren't saying it would replace all.
No, it's not going to replace a desktop.
But so you don't think that there's a time when you need that clamshell sort of input device situation? And I could see a future where the keyboard becomes obsolete, perhaps, or becomes programmable. But I maybe I'm just being old-fashioned, stuck in my ways. But I feel like there's still a time when I want to take that tablet screen and stick it in something that I can look there and manipulate from down here without getting gorilla arm.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't really getting the whole gorilla thing when I was using my iPad for 2 weeks.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was actually fine.
Because I mean, that's the point not to miss is you've done this.
Yeah, and I had it, you know, it's closer to me. So when I'm touching the screen, it didn't really feel too awkward. Mm-hmm. But I tried editing a video once on my iPad. That didn't work.
With iMovie or?
No, I was using a software to log into my Mac Pro.
Oh, okay. You were VNCing.
Yeah, I was VNCing into my Mac Pro, and
yeah,
that didn't work too well. So
too laggy.
It's too laggy, and also I didn't get any audio. But
well, that hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of what happens, we'll get bigger thumbs. They're going to turn to fingers.
Will we get keyboard thumbs?
Well, wait. I love this idea that the thumb will change to be truly the fifth finger instead of this little, you know, this stepchild it is now. Which
will
is,
it still be
useful.
opposable?
Yeah, it'll be opposable, but it'll be,
good.
Yeah.
But it will elongate, right, Tony? It'll be like, you know, index finger length.
Maybe we'll get an extra joint.
That's awesome.
That would actually be
an extra joint.
In only 14 or 15 years? That's crazy.
Wow.
You said this was your short term. I think it's your crazy ass.
Kind of all rolled into one,
yeah. I do think you're on to something, though. I do think that the laptop as we know it is going to change. Maybe I'm not sure exactly how that's going to happen, but... Do you think we'll ever lose the keyboard, though? Because we'll need it for desktops.
I think, well, it's going to be on screen. So, I mean, the layout will be the same, but you just...
Or you might even have a second screen that just pops up when you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I don't think personally, I don't think the voice command thing's going to take off. Just because, can you imagine go into a cafe and there's 15 people in there and they're all talking to their computer?
I think the only way that voice takes off is when they perfect mouth shape recognition, which they actually can do.
Yeah, we saw that.
It's in laboratory. Yeah. So you don't actually speak out loud; you just voice. Coffee shop's still going to look a little weird with everybody sitting around, just kind of mouthing words.
I would argue weirder, by the way.
But it isn't as disturbing. You're not necessarily going to bother somebody.
Right.
Dwight,
they would have to look at you to be bothered, for sure.
Do you think you could do it without a keyboard if you could just sub-vocalize what you needed?
I have a hard time imagining that, but I'm of the generation. I'm also a journalist, and the idea of doing without a keyboard is kind of.
But that was Hunter S. Thompson's dream,
shakes.
right? Is Hunter S. Thompson was like, I want to get rid of the keyboard and just have my thoughts go straight to the paper.
Well, and that's, I think, more interesting is the idea of using thoughts as opposed to some kind of gesture or voice. Then you just have people sitting in coffee shops staring at the screen, which is kind of what happens now. Mm-hmm. And then you end up controlling it with your thoughts. I think that's ultimately where we're headed in terms of input.
I can't imagine the security risk of that, transmitting your thoughts. Like if somebody hijacks your...
Everybody's the brain is naturally encrypted, so your machine would match to your particular brainwave like a fingerprint.
Oh,
that's true. Don't let anyone get your machine, then you'd be fine.
That sounds expensive, though.
At first,
yeah. Price will come down, though.
Okay.
Yeah. All of this does.
It'll be in Walmart eventually.
That's the thing. If you could actually add up the potential cost of things we talk about on FourCast, if we could somehow sum that all up, holy crap, Tom.
The economy,
just the nations who fight wars with giant robots on the sands of the Serengeti or whatever.
The military budget alone of this show would bankrupt most of the world. No, I think we've hit on it. I think Tony's future could easily come true if we get the thought control. And as crazy as that sounds, we have limited thought control of cursors and things like that, so it's not unthinkable.
Yeah.
And then I hadn't thought about the natural encryption. That's pretty nifty. Something you have, and something you know, right there, all in one.
Actually, that sort of solves the other prediction a little bit, which is if we start getting better and better at tying our own brain into the way that we compute things outside of ourselves. Maybe that takes care of some of these security risks. You'd still have a few legacy users like, I love my Windows XP and I'm not leaving for nobody. Nobody's putting no probe in my brain. But at that point, who cares? We just need enough people to move to the brain stuff that, it's already got. If it's got the encryption, then who cares? Best encryption in the world, can't break it.
I think
only torture.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have the big disaster that will make us want security and motivate us to make the brain interface.
Oh man!
And it all works. It all ties together.
Circle of life.
Well, we've solved the future, Simba. So, what do you say? What do you say, Scott Johnson? We settle down there into 4 questions.
All right. Well, 4 questions. If you are new to the show, is a place or a time on the show where we ask 4 questions of each of our guests, rapid fire style. We take turns. I start. Tom goes next, and we ask them quickly, which means they do not have a lot of time to answer. They must answer from the gut. And I'm going to start with my questions. I don't know who I'm asking. Who am I asking?
Dwight.
Dwight, are you ready for your questions?
Yes.
These are even better when we don't know who we're writing them for. So here you go. When we are all fed nothing but some sort of gray gruel-like nutrient, what do you hope it's all flavored like?
Pizza.
I am with you there.
Good call.
Excellent answer. One day we will all be separated in colonies based on the new Pac-Man personality test. Which do you think you're going to be more like? Blinky, Pinky, Inky, or Clyde?
Oh, Clyde.
So the one that I can count on turning the other way when I'm least expected.
Absolutely.
All right.
Right turn, Clyde.
Next up, what faction will you back during the Corn Wars of 2245? The soft drink, the Chicken McNugget, or the Great Flake faction? Or another one that I don't know of.
Pizza.
Corn-based crust.
There
No,
is
I
more
think
truth in that
I'm a
than we
chicken
care
man.
about.
I'm a chicken man.
Oh, nugget man. Oh,
There's probably corn. Corn is in every freaking thing we're eating. I'm sure pizza crust is not immune. So there you
That's
go.
right.
Then finally, your last question. Will we ever have a single national lottery in this country? Why or why not?
Yes, and we will because that's how you'll get the biggest number, and people want that huge number.
That'll be one of the future tax plans. We'll revise the tax code by replacing it with a national lottery.
Oh man,
That's a great idea.
I know.
That's a great idea.
I'd love that idea.
Well, Dwight, congratulations. You have passed this test that we call 4 questions. Nice job.
Do I get the refrigerator?
You do. And the new car.
All right.
Sometime in the future.
Yeah. I'm sorry. And the new car.
And a new car.
There you go.
Okay, Tony, are you sitting comfortably?
Yes.
Excellent. Then we'll begin. Question number 1. When will we have our first colony off planet, and who will run it?
2035 on the moon.
It'll be on the moon,
Cats.
as we expect.
Cats.
2035.
Yeah.
Who will run
right.
it then? We could even pick a name who's alive now.
I'll probably be close to dead by then, but at least I'll see it.
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson will still be alive by then, of course,
Hopefully.
because he is a
In a
cyborg.
jar, yeah.
In a jar. Question number 2. Will the nation state always be the dominant form of political organization?
Yes.
Oh, see, now I don't have a follow-up, because if you say no, then I'm like, well, what will become? So why? There you go.
I thought I'm not supposed to think about this.
Yeah. Don't think about why. Just tell me why.
Yeah. Because that's the way it is right now.
Because things never change.
Yeah.
Question number 3. What will be the most popular drink in 1,000 years?
Milk.
Does about a good.
Yes.
Yeah. You can always get it. There's cow. Well, that leads to question number 4. Will cows make it off the planet? Will
No.
we have cows in space? No. So where are they going to get their milk?
We'll grow it in petri dishes.
Okay, synthetic
Or
milk.
burger,
Actually,
yeah.
that's quite possible. Yeah. All right. Well, you have
pretty good? Almond milk. Almond milk's really good, by the way.
Almond milk.
Yeah.
It's always hard to milk the almonds, though.
I know, little tiny udders. Just littlest little udders on those things.
All right, thank you. That is 4 questions. Thank you, Tony Wang.
Thank you, Tom.
No, thank you. We could do this all night. Thank you for watching, everybody. That's it. That's our show. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. Of course, Tony, since we've been thanking each other, let's keep going. Thank you for filling in. Of course, we had Paul Thurrott from Windows Weekly and Win Super Site, but he had to bow at the last minute because of illness. So we hope he feels better. But let folks know where they can find your work on the web.
You can find me on about.me/Tony Wang, and I post. There's links on there to my other sites, and there's a cool picture I took of the Sword and Laser site.
We're using those photos. Tony's a great photographer. He took some good publicity photos for us for the new Sword and Laser show. Thanks for that, by the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can see me on Before You Buy.
Awesome. And Dwight Silverman, great to have you on the show as always. Thank you for taking the time to share your vision of the future with us, and let folks know where they can find your work online.
My blog is at blog.cron.com/techblog. I'm also really active on Twitter at dsilverman. And you can listen to our radio show, which is on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Central at geekradio.com.
Excellent stuff. Definitely check them out. blog.cron.com/techblog. And geekradio.com. Scott Johnson, anything you need to tell folks about? Maybe the Autopilot show coming up this Wednesday?
So last week, because of some scheduling stuff, we didn't get a chance to sort of pimp it, as the kids say, here on this show on FourCast. Autopilot at autopilotshow.com, a brand new show with me and Tom Merritt. You've seen his face just a moment ago. We take on pilots of significant shows, sometimes genre-based and sci-fi and fantasy and stuff, but not always. Sometimes not. We started with Star Trek. This week, we're doing the big 3-part, quote-unquote, pilot of Battlestar Galactica.
Except as I keep correcting you in the show, it wasn't always 3 parts.
Right. It's a weird mix, so you're just safe to say pilot, but it's interesting. It's the Lauren Green years, everybody. Definitely check that out. It's streaming on Netflix. You can watch it first, then you can catch our show. Airs every Wednesday. First thing in the morning, like midnight server time, that thing shows up, and you can go check that out again at autopilotshow.com. And we're super excited about it. And thanks, by the way, if people are listening who have heard it and have given us feedback, I'm a little blown away by the positive feedback. You guys have been awesome. Clearly, we're on the right track, and we hope you like this week's episode.
Thanks, everybody, for watching or listening to this show as well. Do send us your visions of the future. We use them in the show. FourCast at twit.tv or FourCastPodcast at gmail.com and FourCastPodcast.com. We'll see you next time.
Wait.
There was just enough echo left at the
Just
end.
Hello.
Wait.